Good morning, good evening, everyone. This is Luda Kopikina with GAI Insights. Welcome to AI Daily News Review, where we rate the news, essential, important, and optional, to help you navigate the avalanche of the news and stay connected to the trends that are happening as we speak. So you can follow along with the articles that are on our website on gaiinsights.com/articles. Today we have Paul, John, Tim, and Adam, and Ankash, the full crew. And we're going to walk through 6 articles today. Okay, let's start with the first one. Ankash, please.
Sure, thanks, Luda. So the first one that we have for today comes from NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has launched a family of reasoning AI models.
Yes, if somebody was doubtful that NVIDIA is in the software business, this actually clinches it. What did you think about this introduction, John?
I was going to rate this important. I think, the number of, capabilities that they're announcing this thing, especially around agentic, capability and, it's really setting a platform for the development of applications. In our pregame, we were just talking about the need for organizations to really have integrated supply, if you will, that goes from, the technology all the way down to value. They have a fantastic set of partners in this thing. They've got, Accenture, Deloitte, a ton of people lined up to really go ahead and implement this. Look, as a product announcement, if it weren't from the market leader, I would not give it an important. And if they didn't have, these kind of partnerships, I wouldn't give it an important. But I think any AI leader needs to understand that, this market leader here is really building, agentic platform on top of their market leading technical, hardware capability. So I was going to give it an important.
Yep.
Okay, Adam, what did you think?
I was giving it an optional. I think John makes some fairly good cases. I could support important. I would have liked some more details about the size of these models and some sort of performance metrics. And I'm pretty sure these aren't actually available yet. These are true product announcements. These are things on the roadmap still that we can't get access to. So I was more in the optional camp, and that this is something that's forthcoming, and we'll hear more about it. But John makes some really good cases as well, so I could be swayed.
Tim, now the article mentions the 5x inference improvement and much better than the actual model, and it is available to developers free, essentially.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, some of it's available, some of it's not. But I was between optional important, leaning towards important for exactly the reason John said. I mean, it's NVIDIA. And again, every major corporation is incorporating these models into their platforms. So I think that is, it's hard to ignore. And again, you don't want to be caught flat-footed as a leader, not being aware of what the major players are doing. The other thing is it reinforces this whole idea of agentic activity. So again, it's taken longer. It will probably take longer than people believe, but they're clearly, all the big players are working on this and seem to be making progress. And there's also a reasoning model in here. So again, it's a little bit of a catch-up announcement in that sense, but because they're a major player and they're getting all the other major players to line up and say yay, I think you got to read it, at least important.
Okay. Paul, going important, okay with that?
I am, and I'm on a broken record, just reminding everyone to not think of NVIDIA as a chip company. They are the windtail of this AI generation. And their profits are unbelievable, and they are a powerhouse. And AI leaders can't think of them some little chip maker that I can ignore.
And they wield that power to recruit all those partners. This was amazing across the consulting companies, Microsoft and the like. It's really amazing set of partners who are ready to support them. Okay, important it is. Let's proceed.
On that point, Luda, I have a dear friend, Toby Redshaw, who was heading up the 5G lab activity at Verizon some years ago. And he said, 15 years ago, he was getting calls, well, more like 12 years ago, he was getting calls from NVIDIA about how to work together. So they've been working, major, and the same thing is true for Siemens and for SAP and you name it. I mean, you name a major provider, and they have been working it for over a decade. So God love them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, important it is. Let's proceed, Ankaj.
Okay, the next one that we have for today talks about managing frontier model training organizations.
Yes, Adam, this is
Yes,
an interesting article. What did you think about that?
Interesting. I think unless you're an AI executive at a frontier model organization, this is mostly academic and perhaps of interest, but an optional read. It does basically, in summary, observe that the companies that are doing it well, like Anthropic and OpenAI, have small teams with a bottom-up approach. The ones that have top-down mandates don't really see the same success. Super interesting, not necessarily so surprising in my opinion either, but an optional read for a time-starved executive, certainly.
Optional.
Yeah.
Okay. Tim, you will find, I was going to say, you will find a lot of good software development best practices in this article, didn't you?
Reasonable. Yeah. I mean, but, they clearly haven't read any papers from Harvard Business School or MIT Sloan Review or lots of other places that have been talking about this stuff for many years. Nathan's really smart, and I have a ton of respect for him. And I read this stuff on a regular basis, but I agree with Adam. It's mostly stating, to me at least, stating the obvious, and it's mostly applicable to frontier model developers.
Yeah. Okay. John?
Yeah. Adam, I would defend the term academic. This does not come anywhere near being academic. It's this.
Maybe pedantic. Maybe pedantic is the word I wanted.
Yeah, this is like this. A lot of times, smart people think they can opine in any area. This is so incredibly naive from the point of view of organization understanding and theory. It's just laughable. So I promise not to opine on quantum physics, and this guy shouldn't opine on organizations.
Okay, optional it is.
Hey, just one comment, Luda. Adam, for 12 years when John was teaching at Harvard Business School, every day the students had to come up with their A game. Very sharp teacher and wouldn't let anyone get away with anything.
Okay. All right, optional it is, guys. Let's proceed, Ankaj.
Okay, the next one that we have is a research paper which talks about measuring AI ability to complete long tasks.
Yeah, 50% metric on how good those models do. What do you think about this one, Tim?
Well, I'm all in favor of all research and evaluation. So from that perspective, I say yay. I think it's completely optional for the AI leader because it's research and it's not even clear this will really work. It's a very interesting idea. It's sort of, measuring the half-life, which is what we do in physics all the time because these things never actually expire. Radiation and things like that, but they have very definable half-lives that give you a comparison between various forms of material. Very useful. So they're trying to get sort of that kind of theory to say, well, if we could measure the 50% success rate, we would have some sort of normalization that we could apply across models and across tasks to see how these models are doing. That's a big leap already to say you can go from atoms decaying in radiation to software or other complex intellectual tasks having this kind of half-life. But the idea is reasonable, and they went through some reasonable efforts. Lots of big assumptions in here, and so it's definitely optional in my opinion right now. Interesting, and as I said, I support all research into any kind of evaluation. Just remember it's research and you have to evaluate the evaluation before you can actually begin to see whether it's going to be worthwhile.
Yeah, how much do you give credence to the prediction then in 5 years these models will do way better than humans in most of the tasks
Well, that
on the
prediction
long task?
I can easily give 100% because way better is pretty easy to wave off. I think it's extremely unlikely they won't be better in 5 years by a good bit than they are now. How much better and what characterizes length of task is such a complex question. We're going to have another article about measuring software productivity, which, this is a button push for me because we measure it as if linear increase in effort and volume means productivity. And in fact, it's exactly the opposite. Architecture and software architecture, if you think about architecture, what it really means is I can build the same thing for 10x less material, or I can build things that I couldn't build before with prior architectures. So, you can't build a skyscraper without rebar. You just can't do it with other materials and other architectures, and you can build much larger anyway. So, on the other side of this is you're measuring software productivity. It's a little bit off the mark, in my opinion. You want to measure value, which is really hard, even harder than measuring productivity.
Yeah, so here we are going for triple optional. John, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think so we're going to pound the crap out of this one and optional. I do think, though, it's very interesting. Look what's happened in the last 12 months. We've gone from some models to deep research, which are going off, and this is just going to continue the trend. So I think a year from now, we may have models that work 2 or 3 hours or 2 to 3 days completing tasks. So this whole trend that the intelligence is getting at the task level much faster than a lot of us even thought a year ago is very real. But this article is optional.
Okay, optional it is. Yes, let's proceed then.
Okay, the next one talks about how researchers are saying that they have discovered a new method of scaling up AI, but there are reasons to be skeptical.
Yeah, so the new method is all about performance efficiency during runtime. So, John, what did you think about the method and whether you believe it?
Yeah, I was going to definitely give this an optional. This first of all, the notion of scaling laws is so sloppy anyway, right? The idea, the fundamental idea that there's increased value by increasing scale, I think is interesting. Calling them laws was really nutty, to begin with. I mean, it was just an artifact of where it was in the semantics of the model, and this notion of finding a new scaling law by having more and more answers created in parallel, and essentially creating, I think of it as kind of working process inventory for inference, if you will, and selecting among that gets you to a better point than other kinds of reasoning. Yeah, look, I mean, we're going to find this is a complex problem where, as Tim said, what's the value? And the value is often embedded in the use of whatever the inference is, right? Which is hard to define a priori. Then you've got, where are you going to put where are you going to put the compute power and the algorithms to create value, right? To process, WINS work, words, images, numbers, and sounds. And, how is that going to get optimized across time and value? That's a complex thing, saying, so here's an experiment that says, okay, let's blurt out, tons of solutions and search that space. Is that better? Yeah, cool. But to call it a law, I think is, way beyond the pale. So optional.
Okay, going optional. Adam, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree it's optional. I want to just call out one excerpt from this where they're talking about it, and they say it doesn't elevate the reasoning process. It's a way of working around the limitations of a technology prone to making very confidently supported mistakes, right? If a model makes a mistake 5% of the time, but you look at 200 answers, you're more likely to notice that it made a mistake. It's an important concept, and I bring it up because it's relevant to the next article we're going to discuss. But at that, it's optional. It's research.
Okay.
It's it does point to the fact that there are other ways we're still going to be able to get better answers out of these models, though.
Yeah, what would be nice if some of these researchers would actually, and I don't think our next paper does this, were to lay out an ontology of what we're talking about, right? Like, what is the, how are we even thinking about what good is and truth is and all that other stuff? Instead, this is kind of epistemology about wandering around. It's anyway.
I like
It's a
that.
PhD paper, don't you know? Okay, it's
Yeah,
optional. It is then, unless.
Yeah,
we
I think I
just-
will say just to stick one quick comment in here.
Okay.
The idea of search is really important. This is algorithmic development, as John likes to refer to it. It's proven pretty successful. I think the scaling thing is a red herring. And the bigger issue is, can these models improve themselves by using these new algorithms? That's the holy grail, if you will, right now, is can we get the difficult to scale human reinforcement process out of these models and still see them improve, which this paper doesn't say much about. So,
Right.
Optional.
Yeah.
Big
Optional,
idea, but
that's
optional.
what they tried, right? So they took all the models, they generated in parallel a whole bunch of answers, picked the best one. The
Right.
best is in the eye of the beholder,
But
right?
that's already a well understood
And
process.
improved it, right? So improved it a number of times. So it's a model, right? But
Yep.
it is very. I agree with the skeptics. It's not quite clear that it would improve everything. Yeah.
Well, and the evaluation function is critical, as they point out.
Exactly.
And Tim, where's your gut on will AI be able to improve itself going forward here?
Oh,
We're gonna
I
see
think
that in
it's
2
already
years?
already most of the way there.
Yeah.
People are shocked at how good it is at improving itself. The question is, what's the threshold need
Yes.
to be? Does it need to be 100%, 99%, 90%? It's already over 90%. So that's the real hard part until you see it in use. It's like a user interface. You can design a way until you're blue in the face, but until you start using it, you don't know what the trust boundary is that you have to get above.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we're going to have an evolutionary semantics. I think the right way, if we think about semantics before the models, the semantics in computer science was largely declarative normative, right? So this is the right answer. Here's how you get there. Here's how you define truth. This is more behavioral and natural, which is, if you think of these things as alive, and then they find niches, right? So those niches they can dominate a niche, whether or not that niche is good. Do you like kudzu? I don't know. So it's going to get funky. And the problem is that none of these, or very few of these engineers, have ever been taught any epistemology of morality. So they're wandering around inductively creating this stuff that a lot of people have thought about for a long time, and they're not dealing with the boundary conditions.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. No, this is good discussion. Thank you. But let's proceed. This is optional, but good discussion about evaluation metrics and the like. Okay, Ankash, please, next one.
Okay, the next one talks about AI search has a citation problem, and it comes from Columbia Journalism Review.
Right. So can we trust it? That's the question. And this is a research with good examples that claiming that we could not. What did you think about this, Adam?
Yeah, I thought this was some interesting research. I like the approach they took. Ankaj, if you can just scroll down to one of the charts that has all of the red on it. So basically what they did is they have 200 articles. That's great. They had 200 articles. It was 10 different sources, and I believe 20 articles from each, 10 different publishers. And then they randomly pulled an excerpt from it and gave it to these 8 different models and said, please cite the correct article, the correct publisher, and the correct URL. And then they evaluated how confident was it in its responses. And as you can see from the red there's quite a bit of times with all of these models where they were confident in their response and they were completely incorrect, right? So if nothing else, as a cautionary tale with some really solid metrics behind it, on all of the models out there, I think it's worthwhile at least flagging this as important. Ankaj, if you scroll down, which is quite interesting, is there's a chart near the bottom with Copilot showing nothing below the line. Yeah, it might be the last one there. Anyway, what was interesting is Copilot was the only one for which it was able to actually get results for all 200 articles. It wasn't blocked by any of them. And they speculate it's because Copilot uses the same search underneath it as the Bing search engine. And basically, companies can't show up on Bing search if they don't agree to being crawled by Microsoft. So Microsoft has a privileged access, was one interesting finding from this article. But so I'd say it's an important read overall.
Okay, so going important. Tim, what did you think?
Well, I'm almost going to make the case for essential here. And the reason is people just underestimate what these things really are. Actually, are unfamiliar and naive about what these things really are. And we're so easily fooled by the confident tone that, the research itself is okay, at least it's quantitative. And it doesn't show those of us who are in this deep anything we didn't already know. But I think a lot of people don't know this. And it's good for them to know that, if you're relying on this thing, if you do one of these deep research models and you get 50 citations, that doesn't mean that half of them are wrong. And so you need some, go back to John's epistemology, you need some critical thinking here when you get the results from these things. And I think pointing that out is important amidst all the hype about how great these things are. So I would say it's worth taking the time to read just to raise some consciousness about how flawed these things can be, even the best of them, at what is really a pretty straightforward task. So their form, this is, the other way you can look at it is form versus function. So the form of these things is already fantastic. They can sound very human, very confident. They can adopt tones. They can do all sorts of stuff. But the content is still somewhat suspect.
Yeah. So going essential, John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Kim has brought me from important to essential. Yes, I think that what I like about it, they laid out the methodology. It's rigorous. I mentioned it's repeatable. And just there's some stuff in decision science that shows that ease of access to information often increases the reader's confidence in that information and its veracity. And so I think you put it beautifully, Tim, to say, look, this is the triumph of form over function, and that we're not accustomed to tools that do that so convincingly and anthropomorphically. So I think it's a big warning sign that we have to teach people how to use these in a skeptical way.
Yeah, doesn't mean they're not valuable. It just means you have to be a little less naive about how to use them.
Yep. Okay, going on essential. Paul, Adam?
Yeah, I can certainly support it. I do think it's important for the AI leader to start thinking what a world looks like when 70-80% of all the internet content is AI generated. And I think this gets them on that path.
Adam, anything to add?
Yeah, I can support that. I had Ankash find there, you can see where Copilot search had none of the results blocked that I was mentioning before.
Yeah, it does show you how these massive companies use their power, right? So Google apparently lets you block just the generative AI search, but Microsoft does not. So either you're in Bing and the AI search crawlers, or you're not in Bing, which is still the second largest search engine, I believe. So puts a lot of pressure on websites that want traffic.
Yeah, and it also underscores the evaluation function, the need for evaluation function when you have search engines running
Yep.
your applications. So
Yep, somebody should write, and you could probably do it in a GPT, something that just goes to every citation and makes sure there's something there, for instance.
You really
and the title actually matches the title in the citation. You could do simple things like that you could automate, but yes.
You absolutely really need to have evaluation functions on that. And that is important that this article kind of stresses. Okay, essential it is. Let's proceed to the last one, Ankash.
Okay, the last one talks about AI revolution meeting the credibility revolution.
That's a econometrics, I guess, would be the best way to say it, and it underscores the again evaluation functions and how you look at the data in which light. So, Tim, what did you think about this one?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Andrew and Bjorn, Eric Bjorn. What I can never say his last name. These guys are out of Sloan. They've done some really good work over the years, I think, and I've met Andrew.
Actually, Tim, it's Brynjolfsson, and he's moved to Stanford. So is Andy.
Oh, has he? Okay, so wherever they are, they've done good work for a long time, and I think at least. And this is okay. It's a bit of an ad for their new consulting organization, which is again about how to use economics correctly, and they did a good job of pointing out all the problems of observational statistics, which we won't go into too much here. But it is a real problem for organizations to try and separate cause from correlation. And so they did a good job of pointing out why that is, and that there are statistical techniques and design techniques these days that you can use. So, okay, I would give it maybe an important. Again, it pushes all my buttons because they're measuring software productivity through pull requests, as they're called, and merge requests. This is, in the old days, we used to call this check in and check out, or check out and check in, I guess, is usually the order. So you check out the code, you work on it, you check it back in. And there's this assumption that the more you do that, the more productive you are. So again, I can think of easy ways for a very lazy programmer to just write automatic tools to just check things out and in a lot and look extremely productive. And nobody's talking about, well, is the software any good and does it do anything useful? So there's a bit of the, what are you really measuring here and is it worthwhile? But I think that the meta point of being careful about how you measure and really being careful about causation versus correlation when you don't have real experimental design is a good point. So I might give it an important, but I'd probably say optional overall.
Optional / important. What did you think about this, John?
Yeah, I'm definitely optional on this one. Look, he makes a lot of good technical points in the context of what's going on here. My problem is that, and this is my problem with a lot of people in economics, is that they're not Bayesian enough. They don't look at the nature of the distribution of what it is that they're looking at. So, to Tim's point, software productivity is not normally distributed, and a lot of these techniques assume normal distribution underneath here, which is just nutty. And put another way, a great software team isn't 20% more productive than some other software team. They are 10,000 times more productive, and this kind of measurement will never capture that. So optional.
Optional. I was actually also thinking important because this points also to the people that, and makes a point that the people who were using AI were already skilled. And it's very important to separate who are the people that before you measure the productivity. And that article makes it very clear that you need to look at the data very carefully and not mix up the causation sources. So I was thinking important. Paul, what do you think? Oh, we lost Paul.
We've lost Paul.
Okay.
I was leaning towards optional. I think I'd be okay with an important. It is an important point, as Tim pointed out.
It is a promotional article, though, very much saying at the end that let's use our services to look at the data carefully.
Right. And John makes a good point too, that again, this is if you ever read Nassim Taleb, he calls it mediocristan versus extremistan. But the point is, we make all sorts of assumptions about the distribution of underlying capabilities, which are usually not true. So if you're measuring gas molecules in a room, it's pretty true. But the way you can tell is if you add one, can it really screw up all of your calculations? So if you add one molecule in a room, it's not going to screw up your calculations. But if you're talking about wealth and you add Elon Musk or Bill Gates to 1,000 people's wealth, it totally distorts everything. And so it's not a normal distribution. So that is an excellent point.
Yeah, it is.
It's also interesting because so many companies are looking at development actually as the killer use case that can justify their investment in ROI in generative AI, and this just completely undermines it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it as important. I think there's a big contingent of folks that could get value out of this article. Okay. Important it is. Ankaj, could you please give us the score? Any announcements? John, Tim, Adam?
Nope. Our our recruiting for speakers for our event in the fall is coming great. We're going to be at MIT on April 15th for the big show there. So lots of great activity going on in terms of the community here.
Okay. Great. We have 1 essential, 2 important, and 3 optional today. The essential is the citation problem of our search engines, to be careful about that. And with that, we end our review for today. Thank you all for listening and participating. Really appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.